what was the applicant you were looking for? Like, what was the criteria that you were looking at?
They're usually committees. They're usually groups of people making
Mm-hmm.
decisions. So everybody has a little different. I'll tell you what I look for,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's not necessarily what everybody looks for. I can tell you
Yeah.
different things other people look for. But for me, I would look for folks who good at writing. Look at the writing sample. Look at whether they written, not necessarily on a journal or anything, but written briefs. They were comfortable, writing experiences. And as I said, even though, because it was a litigating office, you have a trial office, even though they maybe not had done a trial, but had you done mock trial, had you done moot court, have you done something in your position that shows that you have an interest in litigating. So I look, I would kind of look at 5 things, basically. I would sort of write out.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Conversate with Akeem D. Earl, and I'm here with, I call him Professor Morgan. I'm here with Keith
You
Morgan.
Call me Keith now. That's right.
Yeah, right. It's weird saying the full name.
Call me Keith.
Right. It's so weird when I leave. It's like, you call me Deborah. Now you call me like, Professor, I'm sorry. It's hard. It's hard to call you by your first name.
No, Keith, please.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Keith, thank you for being on the episode of the podcast of Conversate. So, and the official opening question for this podcast, all the listeners know, is if I was not an attorney, I would be a what?
Wow, that's a good one. I'd probably be a teacher, like not teaching law, teaching probably something else. Both my parents were teachers, so
really,
probably something like that. I would think.
What did your parents teach?
Both taught physical education. My dad was a physical education teacher in Harlem, in New York.
Nice.
And my mom taught in New Jersey and in Virginia. She taught physical education. She taught in preschool, different than they had an aunt who taught English in Brooklyn.
Nice.
That was
family full of teachers. What about teaching do you like the most?
I like working with the students and seeing the development over time, seeing folks, learn the material, get better, the interaction, and that's fun. That's a good process.
Yeah.
So coming back and teaching at UDC has been good experience.
Yeah.
But
so
probably that. Yeah. But probably teaching. But I didn't really, I decided to go to law school so early, when I was in college. So I didn't really think a lot about other careers. I had an uncle who he was a business person. You should major in econ. That's what you should do. You should do economics. And I tried that, and it just wasn't for me. But I majored in political science, and the natural thing for poli-sci majors is to go to law school. So,
got you. So, what made you choose the path of law? Why did you know so early that you wanted to be a lawyer?
I guess I didn't really think about what I was just trying to get through high school, get through college, and wasn't, what I could do well in school, and not thinking so much about careers. Maybe I should have during that time. And I didn't know a lot of lawyers, in high school and growing up. I knew my parents' divorce lawyer. I guess I had met, and a few people in the community. But I always liked government, political science, and issues, like even as a young kid. And so I did an internship for Congressman Clay, who was the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus on the Hill, and I was in college. And a lot of the folks that I met were lawyers. I didn't really know them. I just knew they were doing interesting things. Right. They had a law degree. And so when I went back to college, I kind of decided, I'm going to go to law school. And so I took one of those LSAT courses over the summer. And talked to more people, talked to some of my professors in college, and really decided at that point that I would go to law school. Or at least try to get to law school.
Right. Nice.
So there.
Right. So you just dropped the bomb, though. You said your parents' divorce lawyer. It's funny because I was just posting a clip about stereotypes of lawyers growing up. Did that experience with your parents and the divorce lawyer, did that turn you off from the law anymore? Like, was that like a difficult process?
It wasn't, I was so young, I was young when it happened, and other relatives, had lawyers and experiences similar. And I saw that clip and I thought about that. And it reminded me of actually a discussion I had with my uncle. He really, as I said, you should major in economics. You should, you should do economics. and I didn't even want to tell him that I wasn't. So I was like a year or so into college, and I said, I'm not going to do economics. I'm going to do political science. And he said, the
Mm-hmm.
only thing you can do with that is go to law school. And the
Mm-hmm.
only thing and you can become a lawyer. And he says, you're not a good enough liar to be a lawyer.
Wow.
Is how he put it.
Jeez.
And I said, I'll show him. I'll prove that I'm a
gonna
really
lie.
good liar. I'm going to work
I'm
on
gonna get
my
better at
lies.
lying.
I'm going to be
Oh
a good
my
liar. But
God.
that was a little bit of the impression of lawyers is that they were a lot of spin
Yeah.
and, a little bit of a trust issue, I think, in the
Right.
community. But once I decided to do it, my family, both
Came together,
parents,
yeah.
came together and kind of got behind it.
Nice.
But that was, supportive. But it is that sort of trust that,
Mm-hmm.
you don't really, you deal with lawyers in some of the negative circumstances.
Yeah.
So you may have this negative impression.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I said, once I decided to do it, everybody was supportive. They introduced me to other lawyers. We had,
Mm-hmm.
some friends in the family who were lawyers, but
Nice.
again, there is always like that clip you pick. There is you put
Mm-hmm.
on that negative impression a little bit
Right.
of
But once they
lawyers.
saw you walking in that field now, they're like, oh, it's not that bad. Like you
Well,
changed the perception.
a little bit, I think, for some folks.
Right.
My grandmother would say, that you think you know everything because you're a lawyer now. She would joke with me like that and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
with relatives. But I think they were, proud of the fact that I did go to law school and,
Yeah.
kind of got behind, they definitely got behind it. So
Nice.
they were
Nice.
supportive.
So you went to the University of Virginia School of Law.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And you went in the 80s, right? 19.
Yep.
What?
I was there from 1985 to 1988. So it's kind of fresh in my mind because we just had
Mhm.
our law school reunion. Hard to believe it was 35
Nice.
years ago. But we went back for the reunion this year.
That's awesome. How was going to law school in the 80s? What was law school in the 80s like?
Law school in the 80s, to some degree, it's similar to some ways to now.
Mhm.
In some of what we're experiencing, it was a conservative time in
Mhm.
the country. Reagan was president. Virginia,
Mhm.
in particular, was very focused on law and economics. It was a very
Mhm.
conservative law school, but at the
Yeah.
same time, there was collegiality, especially among the Black students. We were, I
Mhm.
think, very supportive of one another and
Yeah.
close, and still are. And we actually had a little mini reunion of some of the
Within the
Black students
reunion.
within the reunion the Friday before the
Yeah.
reunion. So it was good to see some folks. But it was definitely some. I think we were proud to be there, felt that we belonged.
Yeah.
Not everybody necessarily agreed with that in
Yeah.
terms of the professors and everything, but I think we felt we belonged. It's really folks, if you look at their careers, done great things coming
Yeah.
out of the law school. And I think it started with that, we were determined to do well and stick together. And there was some protests or things that we were, like I said, similar to now, in that we were protesting for the more diversity in the faculty, more Black
Mhm.
faculty, diversity in the law review. Because at that
Mhm.
point, when I got there in '85, there had never been a Black student on law review. And this was '85. It had only been like maybe 15 years that there had been any significant number of Black
Wow.
students. So to get more diversity in the school, within the journals, was an issue in
Mhm.
faculty. And this was a time, I don't know, people talk about it very much, when there were student protests against South Africa, apartheid in South Africa.
Mhm.
There was Nelson Mandela was in prison, and American corporations and schools had invested in South companies that had factories and other investments in South
Mhm.
Africa. So the protests were for the schools to divest from South Africa, to put pressure on the regime, because the
Right.
Blacks were a majority in South Africa, but they were not allowed to vote. They were segregated. It
Yeah.
was a very harsh system.
And
And
these
so we
schools
had
were actively investing in the
yeah,
apartheid, in the oppression of these people.
apartheid regime.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
The
Wow.
idea was that by engaging in South Africa, it would force them to change. That was the defense that corporations had. But
What?
the other
What?
pressure was that they should divest
Yeah.
and isolate the regime to eventually change, which is what happened. The government,
Mhm.
you know, stopped recognizing the South African government and put more and more pressure. So we were involved, in,
Wow.
me and many others. It was a big issue, even when I was in college and in law school, to
Mm-hmm.
protest. I remember one of the things we did was South Africa had these sort of townships that were considered ghettos, and they had what they
Mm-hmm.
called shanties. So we
Mm-hmm.
built like a shanty town on the lawn at UVA,
Ooh.
group of students to protest, and we spent the night. We camped out there, and
Wow.
there were more aggressive protests and things like that. But that was one of the issues, and then eventually there was worldwide pressure.
Yeah.
Mandela was released, and he
Wow.
was eventually became president of South Africa, and there's still changes. But those were some of the issues that we were protesting. So
Wow.
that's what I say was similar
Yeah.
to
And
now
then you
in
have to
some
take a
instances.
contracts final the next week.
Yeah, the contract's
To
final,
leave the
right?
charity and go right back to class.
Go
Go to your
back to
study group.
class, study group. Well, go
Sheesh.
back to class
Right.
and study. But it's like you say, people in the '60s, '70s, there's always issues,
Yeah.
and through the
Yeah.
'90s to protest. And
Yeah.
you see the Black Lives Matter protests now,
Right.
and things like I know you guys were doing at UDC and other schools.
Mm-hmm.
I think back to those
Yeah.
times
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Because
So
once you're in the moment, when you're in it, you never think about like what the previous generations had to go through. Obviously,
yeah,
we learn about it and different things like that. But when George Floyd happened and Breonna Taylor happened, you're like, this is crazy that we're dealing with this while we're actively in law school, and
yeah,
Trump is going on all these different things that we're learning about constitutional law
right,
while Trump is actively breaking the law. It was crazy. But like hearing your story is like every generation had to deal with fighting injustice
right,
in their real lives and then having to go to class and learning in their law school lives too. So the
right.
fact
And
that you were able to see a part is crazy.
we felt that we were also fortunate in a degree because my parents, my mom,
Mm-hmm.
grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia. It was
Mm,
segregated, and
yeah.
went to segregated schools, and they
Mm-hmm.
did well. I mean, they were very proud of the schools that they went to in the
Yeah.
community, and that you see that in a lot of Black communities. But UVA was not admitting Black students in the '50s with any large number. In the
Yeah.
'60s, actually, was a classmate of my mother from high school that was the first Black woman to go to the medical school at UVA
Wow.
in the '60s. So we felt that we were having this opportunity that others
Yeah.
didn't have. But at the same time, there's always a challenge, just like there's challenges
Mm-hmm.
now
Mm-hmm.
that your generation, we still are dealing with
Yeah.
and coming back. And people in this, obviously in the '60s protested and then went to jail and different
Mm-hmm.
things, and then had to
Mm-hmm.
go back to class and
Yeah.
do different things. So
Yeah.
it's a continuing challenge, but hopefully you see some
Yeah.
improvement,
No, it builds on top of each other. It
right?
definitely builds on
Right.
top of each other. The work that you guys put in and what you had to fight for. The students at UVA, they may not have had to fight the fight that you fought, but there's still things that they're fighting for and they're
Yeah.
building on
I
to
mean, I
make it a
can't
better
imagine
institution.
going to UVA during the Unite the Right rally in Charlotte. That
Mm,
it's 2017 when there's a protest over they removed the Lee statue, and then the white supremacists came in and they
yeah, the
killed
Tiki
Heather
torches. Was that
Heyer.
the Tiki
Tiki
torches
torch,
one?
yeah, the Tiki
Yeah.
torch march was in Charlottesville. So
Yeah.
their struggle is going through that, and
Right.
also
Yeah.
trying to get through law school.
Man.
It's a continued challenge.
No.
But your original
Yeah.
question, it was I think a challenging time, but I
Mm-hmm.
met really good friends, really good
Yeah.
people that it was good to see. Although it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to believe it was 35 years ago, but
Yeah,
it was
man.
good to see. We lost some of his classmates,
Man.
so it
Yeah.
was some of that was a little bittersweet. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
some passed
Man.
away.
That's
One
real.
good friend
Rest
passed
in
away
peace.
last year, so it was
Man.
kind of good to see folks and
Yeah.
back to that.
That's awesome. So you finished law school, at the bar exam.
Right.
Where did you took the bar in Virginia? To the Virginia bar?
And I took Pennsylvania bar
Took the
actually, and
Pennsylvania.
waived in
Okay.
DC. Yeah.
Okay. Give a bar exam horror story. Did anything go wrong while studying, while on the exam?
Anything went wrong? Well, I had a I was in Charlottesville for the summer studying for the
Mm-hmm.
bar, and I had a public interest job, at the Federal
Mm-hmm.
Election Commission.
Okay.
Most everyone else at that was graduating that was there that summer had jobs in law firms, and the law firms would give them money for the summer, stipend, whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't have that, but I wanted to focus on studying the bar, and so I went to so I didn't have any. I needed money, and
Yeah.
so I went to the development office or admissions office. I don't remember, one of the career placement offices, and we talked about what they could do for public interest people in that position.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the first recipient of what they call the public interest loan that UVA had given. And they
Nice.
basically loan you money to help with your student loans. And I
Right.
convinced them to start those loans that summer
Mm-hmm.
so I would be able to not have to work and study for the bar.
Right.
And then that helped later on with loans because of the
Mm-hmm.
public interest position. And now that
Nice.
program has really grown.
Awesome.
So a lot of students take advantage of that public interest positions. But so that was sort of the first crisis, was just kind of getting through that summer.
That hurdle. Yeah.
Deal with that hurdle. And the law school, they did step in, and they've started,
Awesome.
I think, a process of supporting public interest people who are, on that career track. And that helped that initial crisis over the summer. And then once, studying for the bar isn't easy. It's obviously it's a challenge for everyone. I know. And the best advice is just, if you can figure out at least 3 weeks, a month, where you can just focus.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I think, a little different than studying in law school, because it's just practice taking the exams, questions,
You're
figuring
learning
out
how
what
to
you
take
did
the
wrong,
exam.
learning how to take the exam, and getting through, figuring out really what you got wrong and why you got it wrong, going into that exam. And to the extent, it's really hard, I know, for people that work, people that, other public interest jobs, don't have jobs at all, to carve out that amount of time. So, you can't just tell your family that, shut down and not have issues, or, not have, work issues and things like that. And like I said, job issues that come up. But if you can constantly, that period of time to focus, that helps. And that's that was sort of the first horror stories. I didn't think I was going to be able to do that. And they were able to help. And it's been good to see that program expand.
No, that's real. That's probably the most insightful bar exam horror story on the podcast so far, because that's so true. The hurdles you have to jump over to even carve out the time to take the exam. I know a couple people who asked their job for like leave to take the exam to study, and the job said no. So they had to wait until like for the next year, for February, to like carve out a certain amount of time.
I mean, it's hard if you can build up the leave, or take a leave of absence, and all of those things are
you're
hard.
losing money.
You're losing money. And I really admire people that are able to do it while, I teach it in the evening program at UDC, the folks that are working and also trying to study for the bar and going to law school. It's a lot, and a lot of employers, don't understand. So probably the best advice is to know, when you're your first year of law school and you're thinking 3 or 4 years in advance, how am I going to strategically carve out that time? If you can. Now, stuff can happen. You have, like I said, issues in your family, issues in your job that make it hard. But if you know going in that that's going to, you need that time. And I think that's what,
plan ahead.
Plan it, if you can, to the extent that you can plan ahead. I didn't plan ahead necessarily, but once it happened, I just kind of parked myself in the offices and said, you need to help folks in this position if the school can. And so they were able to, and again, family help. And Charlottesville's a little cheaper than being in DC or New York or something like that. So
shout out to UDC Law. I would not have been able to pass exam without, because they gave me a stipend to take off for work. So I know that's a blessing in and of itself. So shout out to UDC
and that
Law.
wasn't common, in the 80s. That wasn't. And so I'm glad to see UDC do that, and
of course
people strategically start thinking about that a little bit early.
So I do want to go back to your 35-year reunion. I have one question about that. What was the main thing that you guys like remembered from law school? Like, what was the thing that you guys reminisced the most about in law school?
Well, we talked about a friend hanging out with him, missing him. We
Mm-hmm.
reminisced about him. His
Yeah.
name was Kent Needland,
Yeah.
and
Rest in peace,
Kenton
Kenton.
was a
Yeah.
celebrity in law school, and
Mm.
then he was on the Final Four basketball team at UVA,
Oh,
and
nice.
had played for the Indiana Pacers. And then he came back to
Mm.
law school, and then he
Wow. That's
became a
dope.
sports agent. And so he was really nice, just a
Wow.
great guy and very modest. And
Mm-hmm.
just hanging out with us, just regular people guys, and he's bouncing around playing intramural ball, and he played in the
Right.
NBA.
Play with
He's
Reggie
hanging.
Miller like
He played. It was a little bit before that, but he played,
Oh,
in
right.
that
Yeah.
time. And then
Yeah.
he's hanging out with us. And so losing
Yeah.
him, we talked about just
Man.
kind of the times hanging out with him. But we also talked some about some of the protests and things that we did.
Mm-hmm.
There was a particular professor that
Mm.
actually came up that I won't name, but he would go out of his way to say sort of racially provocative things in class.
Mm.
He would describe, I don't know, remember that DC case with, I think it's Williams versus Walker. It's a case in contracts where the woman buys from a appliance store several appliances on credit.
Mm-hmm.
She
Okay.
pays them off, but falls behind on like a refrigerator, the last
Mm-hmm.
item. And then the store is able to repossess everything that she ever bought from them, including things she'd earlier paid off. And the DC Circuit ruled that was an unconscionable contract,
Mm-hmm.
and that even though she signed it, she shouldn't have been put in that coercive position.
It was revoked. Yeah.
And in class, he would kind of go out of his way to provoke people by saying that she was Black and that she wasn't smart, and if these terms weren't allowed, no one would even do business in these areas in DC. And he would say
y'all
other
are sitting
things.
in class? And he's saying this while y'all sitting in class?
Yeah, he would say this in class. And so there were, by Black students and white students, it was news media, a little bit of news. Was no social media back then. But we reminisced a little bit about kind of how folks handle that, and the allies that kind of work to deal with that. And we used to, actually, the older students would warn us that he would do that in class.
Wow.
And they'd say, this is going to come up. And, so we were sort of ready, but, still not. It was interesting. So we reminisced a little bit, talked about some of those issues and some of the changes in the school. Like, when we were there, Jefferson's statue was in front of the law school. You go in, he was there. Now they've kind of moved him to the side a little bit. So
shifted away.
Shifted. He's still there. He's still a big part of the university, part of the history, and obviously, but they've contextualized him some. But so we talked a little bit about that, some of the just physical changes in the law school.
Right.
But we reminisced about the parties, and the fun times that we had in law school, and so it was good. It's good, like I said, good to see people. So we talked about some of the protests and some of the issues, but also some of the people that were there, either passed on or who couldn't make it, and just some of the hanging out with them, and then also just some of the differences, from when we were in law school. So it was it was a good time. Overall, it was a good time, particularly, as I said, reconnecting with folks.
I find it interesting because going into law school, you're just so focused on like doing well, and you hear the advice about like first semester is the most important semester and all these different things. And it's interesting because you guys didn't talk about reminisce on like the contracts or land grants or cases, stuff like that. You reminisced on like relationships,
right?
And the fact that you were able to build relationships in law school. I think it's important for people to hear that because it feels like you don't want to isolate yourself in law school. While you should be focusing on the work, you are going to depend on these people, some of them for the rest of your lives, and want to be able to network and rely on people in your career. And I'm sure you could attest to being friends with people who you can call on now that you had in law school.
Oh, definitely. I don't know if you remember in the mock trial class, we had Judge Eric Taylor speak to the class.
Yeah, you had a couple people come back.
A couple people that I knew from law school and work. And he was at the reunion, and he's someone I've been friends with since day one, minus one in law school.
Right.
They had a 2 or 3 day program for minority black students to kind of acclimate us to law school. And he was
Mm-hmm.
there, and we got to know each other. Like I said,
Yeah.
that was even before law school started. And
Awesome.
folks that we started, there's Lisa Edwards, who's a classmate who works at
Mm-hmm.
the FCC now, and
Wow.
we reconnected at the reunion. And like I said, talked about, folks that passed on. But it was,
Yeah.
it is the people, and it's the relationships important. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, honestly, I think UDC really does emphasize that. I like the way
Yeah.
the students, I think, interact and support each other,
Mm-hmm.
in class and on, the podcast and things like that. Because,
Yeah.
if we talk more about, how I found out about different jobs, it was a lot of it was through connections, through people
Yeah.
just, helping you out. And a lot of times you think about mentors, you think, your professor,
Mm-hmm.
you think
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
about, your supervisors and jobs and judges if you happen to clerk, but it's also your colleagues that
Yeah.
can be very helpful.
Yeah. I was at
Get
my
you
job
through.
today, and there was 3 UDC law interns, and I was talking to all 3 of them, and they're pretty close. And I pointed that out to them. I was like, I think it's pretty dope that you guys are this close already. They're going
Right.
into their 1L year, and I
Good.
stressing the importance of like having that click, having that close friends, because those are people you're going to rely on, and there's
Yeah.
people in law school that I rely on to this day. So I know
Right.
the importance of that. That's good.
Yeah.
So, pass the bar. You leave law school. What's your first job out of law school?
I worked at the Federal Election Commission at the
Nice.
FCC, which
Mm-hmm.
regulates federal campaigns. I was in the enforcement group,
Mm.
so we did investigations of campaign violations. The allegation would be filed, and we would review the allegations and then send out basically questions to the campaign
Hmm.
about the violations. So it was the FEC at the time, Federal
Mm-hmm.
Election Commission.
So, what were some cases that gave merit? Because I feel like a lot of people could just file a bunch of complaints about campaigns. I feel like this
Yeah.
person won. Like, what gave a complaint actual merit? Like, I'm going to investigate
Well,
this.
they have documentation, and then the
Mhm.
FEC is an interesting place because it's typically 3 Republican and 3 Democratic commissioners, so it's 6
Hmm.
and 6, and
Okay.
so you have to get the commissioners. At least then, I think you still do. You have to get the commissioners to vote on your investigations. They have to
Hmm.
approve your questions. They have to approve different things that you're going to do
Hmm.
in the case. So it really has to be a pretty strong allegation to get
Right.
at least the initial votes to look into it. So if they have documentation, they have bank records, other records to support it. If it's from another campaign, sometimes that would be way, they're biased, but if they have the
Right.
background of the issue.
Right.
And the types of
Actual
violations
evidence.
you see is, say you work for a company and there's $1,000 limit per person. At least I think it's maybe more now, but then it was 1,000 that you could contribute to a campaign.
Okay.
And so to get around that, they would say, I'm the president of the company. I'll give you a $2,000 bonus. You did a good job. And say it's a construction company or a law firm. A law firm, it
Mhm.
was a great year. I'm going to give you a $2,000 bonus, but you got to give 1,000 to this particular campaign. And so now this person, instead of giving 1,000, they're giving the money to their employees to pass
And they're
through
giving,
another 10,000, another
wow.
5,000. And the
Sheesh.
employees will do it because they're going to get,
Yeah,
$1,000.
other half. Yeah.
Other half. And the numbers could be higher, or
That's crazy. Yeah,
whatever.
no, that's a
And
good
so if
example.
one of the employees decides to blow the whistle, or you look at an unusual number of contributions from a particular company or particular business, then that would lead to an investigation. And they could say, well, we all happen to be Democrats, or all happen to be Republicans, we all happen to like this particular candidacy.
Mhm.
There are all those are the types of issues that we would look, those types of campaign violations. And then you would have to gather your whatever proof you had, or whether your suspicions you had,
Mhm.
to convince the commission to at least allow you to take depositions, and then you go
Mm.
question the folks under oath. And that was a good
Mm.
experience, because within a
Yeah.
year I was taking depositions of people working on the this was the first George Bush, this is 88,
Wow.
89, who
Yeah.
were contributing, allegedly violating campaign contribution rules
Mm-hmm.
in presidential campaigns. I was 1 year out of law school,
It's
and
crazy.
so it was interesting. And initially, all of these investigations under seal, because if it's leaked and violation doesn't have any merit, then it could negatively
Mm-hmm.
affect
Right.
reasonably someone's campaign. So it was
Right.
under seal, and I recently looked, and a lot of these now are archived. You can look up these old
Wow.
files
It's public record now.
and
Wow.
public records now. I was looking at some of these depositions, and I was like, oh, I did a pretty good job. And then on the other hand, I was like,
He's just reading
yeah, I
back
was
your
really
own
out of law
work.
school 1 year.
I'm
So it was
proud of
kind of
myself. That was pretty nice. That was a good
that's a pretty
question.
good. That's a pretty good
Good
question.
job,
The other
Keith.
questions, I was like, I don't know. That's a little rough. I hope my mock trial students don't look up
Right. That was,
these
yeah. He was
depositions.
young.
But it
He
was,
was young.
it was. I
Yeah.
think I did like a handful of depositions, so it was good. It was, and then appearing
Man.
in front of the commission, because there was a little bit of
Yeah.
advocacy of convincing them that you had the evidence to go
Right.
forward in your investigation.
I
And
was going to ask, like,
sometimes
was
if
that
you
the
look,
lawyering side of it? It felt like, I was gonna ask, like, what side of it was the lawyering? Did you feel like you're
well, you
doing
had
the
to
most
write, you had to
lawyering?
do a lot of writing, you had to write a report as to your
Mm-hmm.
findings, and
Mm-hmm.
then you had to draft the questions, which are like interrogatories that you would do
Okay.
in civil litigation, and
Mm-hmm.
document requests. There was the advocacy again to the commission and applying the law.
Right.
You had to analyze whether or not there was a violation of the
Mm-hmm.
law. So it was sort of like, what's the issue, what's the statute, and what
Mm-hmm.
facts you have, and then is there reason to believe there potentially could be a violation. You also would look at precedent within the commission, other similar violations,
Mm-hmm.
and then they would have these hearing days, and you would go with the general counsel, and the staff
Mm-hmm.
attorney would sit, and he would generally make the sort of opening presentation, and you would have sort of worked on the script. And
Yeah.
then if they had more detailed questions, you would respond to that. And then they
Mm-hmm.
would vote, and then you would authorize you to issue the subpoena or not. They might say you don't have
Mm-hmm.
enough, or we may decide even before that there wasn't enough. Because like you say, you can get a lot of frivolous complaints that
Right.
wouldn't be
Right.
looked at. And there's a lot of review, obviously, even though the depositions you were kind of you would have a supervisor with you and
Mm-hmm.
working with you, and they would look at your questions beforehand and things like
Okay.
that. But so
Yeah.
those experiences were good, but I wanted to do. I kind of drifted from law school, where I was sort of interested more politically and maybe
Mm-hmm.
working in the Hill and things like that, to when I
Mm-hmm.
got to law school, I got more interested in litigation. I did an
Mm-hmm.
internship the U.S. Attorney's Office, actually, after
Yeah.
my first year in the civil division here,
Nice.
and then in a law firm in Baltimore after my second year. And
Mm-hmm.
so I
Mm-hmm.
got more interested. I did moot court and took trial advocacy in law school, so I got more interested in trial advocacy. I was working at the Department of Justice, so that was what kind of led me to look to leave the FEC.
Man, that's amazing. I did want to ask, with all that went on in law school, with your professors being racist and all these things going
Well,
on in well, not all of them, I know, but that one.
most of them were very
right.
Let me just say, most of them were. One thing I'll say about UVA law professors is, obviously, they weren't all racist, and they weren't all that kind of. But they were good teachers, even if I didn't agree with them for their law and economics type thing in the conservative bent. But they really, a lot of places, they just emphasize the writing and the scholarship, and they view teaching as kind of like a sidelight. But I thought most of our professors really took the teaching aspect as something important, and they were good and entertaining in some degree in terms of the teaching. And so that was a positive aspect, I think, of the law school. There was some good, and we also, as I emphasize the law and economics there they had, but we had one of the first critical legal study professors, Gary Peller, who's a professor at Georgetown now. So they did have some more progressive, more liberal professors at that time as well. But
I guess
go to your question. I'm sorry.
With it, that's just a good clarification. I would say, with everything going on in society, how are you able to maintain your own mental health and your own confidence in yourself and your abilities as an attorney? Because I feel like even you're going through all these different racially charged experiences in throughout life, and you could sometimes think less of yourself because the people around you or people in society are looking down on you. Like, how did you maintain your confidence to still do all these great internships and then go to the FEC and kill it in that space? Like,
Well, I don't know
how did
if
you
I killed
maintain
it
that
there,
level?
but at least I did something there. But
Yeah.
I think the key thing again was the support of the
Mm-hmm.
classmates and friends,
Yeah.
family, support there. And I remember in law school, like you say, it was everyone experiences it's probably a very confusing sort of jumbled time. You're like these new concepts, different way of
Mm-hmm.
learning, different way of
Mm-hmm.
teaching. You can feel isolated.
Yeah.
And we had to do this first year oral argument, where we did like a moot court kind of thing, where we argued our
Mm-hmm.
brief that we wrote the first year, and the professors were the judges.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, you're very confused. Grades you're getting, you're not used to, and it's
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
it's challenging. This was like April. It's like toward the end of my first year, and we
Okay.
do this oral argument. And I don't remember anything about the case. I just remember arguing against one of my classmates, and we argued the brief like here in the Court of Appeals, like moot court. And the professor said that was pretty good, and I
Mm-hmm.
remember thinking, what? Something
Who, me?
positive for me? You're
Right,
talking
right.
to me? That one little thing, because he's still confused and
Mm,
sort of mixed up.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
like, oh, maybe I can do this.
Right, right. I
And
might
you
be
kind
good
of
at
hold
this.
on. You kind of
Mm-hmm.
held on to that. You have to hold on
Yeah.
to
Now one
the one
time,
time somebody said something,
I
positive,
can
and
do
you
this.
kind of, I can do this.
Yeah.
And then the summer internship in the U.S. Attorney's Office, where you kind of seeing lawyers really,
Mm-hmm.
practicing and applying some of the concepts that you learned in class,
Hmm.
in the courtroom, and observing. Also kind of at least made it more interesting. Like, maybe I can do this,
Yeah.
and so sort of, a more
No, that's
positive
real.
experience. But
I
that
feel like
was
a
what I
lot
held
of
on to.
no, that's good. I feel like a lot of law students go through that. That's such a great point. It's like you're taking so many L's back to back, and then you hit a moment where like you get confirmation either on the internship or like you said moot court or from a professor,
Yeah.
and they say something or something happens. Like, wait, I'm actually good at this. Mine was I was fresh into law school, didn't know what was going on. It was very much like a culture shock. I was like,
Right.
this is horrible. And I get like it was my legal writing class, and I get like my first paper back, like a first official paper. Before that, it
Yeah.
was like my professor used to write in purple, so it was purple all over my stuff. Like,
Right.
fix this, fix that. And I get like my first official paper back, and I get a good grade. And she tells me like, you're actually a very good legal writer. And then my TA, who's now my wife, was like,
Oh, wow.
also like, you're actually
You
a
must have
very
been
good
really impressive.
Right. I'm like, yeah, for real.
Yeah.
She was like, yeah, you're actually a very good legal writer. I was like, what? Like, I don't even know, like, because they teach you a whole new way of writing.
Right.
I was like, there's no way I'm good at this because I just started.
Right.
I literally just learned how to write this way. So once I got some confirmation early, I was like, man, I might be in the right space. This might be what I'm supposed to do. So that's a good point. I think every law student can think back on like, when was the first moment you got some confirmation that you're on the right path. So that's good. That's really good.
That was the moment. But the support, I think, kind of this competition and in law school, obviously, but the support that everybody's kind of going through this is helpful.
Yeah, the struggle stories. I always say like the thing that brings law students together is complaining. Like, that's how you make your friends. All you gotta do is complain. Complain about this. Man, that final, I can't believe she left that part out. I can't believe she added that thing. We never studied that at all. Like, just complain, and then you just bring it together because you guys are all going through the same
Going
thing.
through the same thing, right? Right.
So you also worked at the DOJ. That was a big part of your career. What did you do?
I was at DOJ for 27 years. Initially, the tax division, Department of Justice, and I had I had taken federal income tax in law school, but no other tax classes, had no real thought of tax law. But your point about kind of connections and meeting folks is, I was on the subway. I was at the FEC on the subway, and a friend of mine, a guy who graduated a couple years ahead of me, Carl Carter, and he had his this suitcase, and he was going to national. I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Well, I'm working the tax division now. I work at DOJ, and I'm going to take a deposition or a trial or something in Memphis, in Tennessee." And I'm like, "Wow, this is interesting, doing trials." And he said, "You should apply." And I'm like, I didn't take tax, and he had some tax background. I think he was a CPA, and I'm like, "No, I'm not really going to do that." He said, "No, you should apply." And I followed up with him, and I applied. And the way the tax division is worked is, I think you did an internship, right? In the tax division.
Yep.
I was in the civil side, and it's broken into regions. And so I got interviews with the different civil regions, the civil practice. And it's was a great job. And I was fortunate that I think having done the depositions at the FEC really helped, and having that experience, because that's what they're looking for. They're kind of looking, not that you've done a lot of trials, you've only been out of law school a year or two, but you've done something, you've done something that you can kind of build on at DOJ. But just that connection, and
to push you to
was
the door.
able to interview, and I was fortunate they were hiring a lot of new people during that time. A lot of us were relatively new out of law school, and we just wanted to do trials. We wanted to do as much trial experience as we could, and it was just a good time. We had a lot of, like I said, folks, similar periods in their career, still some of my best friends, that I had in the tax division. And I was in the northern region, which covered the Northeast, covered like New York to Maine and out to Illinois. And the reason that the tax division is in DC, covering all the different parts of the country, is that so everybody in the country, the law is applied equally, rather than sort of regional bias. So it meant a lot of travel. You're always kind of the visiting team when you're in court. You're representing the IRS. But it was a litigation challenge, and interesting. And I kind of got to know more of the tax law. I think I don't consider myself a tax expert then or at the time, but you learn the unique issues in the cases. We had really good supervisors that were really supportive. And work with some good folks in the office. And I would just, I'd volunteer to work on trials. And if I knew someone needed help, I would, I'll, be a second chair. And they'd say, "Oh, it's a loser. We're going to lose." I'm like, "Oh, well, we'll get the experience." I don't care.
I'm coming.
And, we didn't, we would go out, we didn't lose them all. We won most of them, but learned a lot, worked with some really good, trial attorneys, talked about how to do cross-examinations, how to sort of have, build your case, how to prepare. And so it was I was there for 4 years, a little over 4 years. And my region was New York and Connecticut. And then I had cases later in Michigan.
Awesome.
And so
I think the most important thing you said there is, like, you applied. Even though you didn't know much about it, you actually went ahead and applied. The same DOJ, I was in the criminal division for my internship, the tax division. And that was a DOJ summer internship program. And the year before I applied and got in, I talked myself out of applying. I didn't feel like I was good enough. That was really, like, I made some excuses. I started the application and I was like, I don't have the grades. I talked myself out of applying and I didn't even apply. The next year I was like, I'm never doing that again. I'm gonna apply. If they say no, they say no. I applied and I got in. And that was probably one of the best experiences. And like you said, I didn't need to know a lot about tax. It was like they use like 3 of the tax code that they prosecute all the cases on. And you're just litigating. You don't need to be a tax expert. You're just applying the law to the facts. And it was an amazing experience. And I would not have been able to experience that if I didn't apply. If you were like, "Oh, I don't know anything about tax, I'm not even going to apply." You made the connection. He got you he got you to the door. All you have to do is just walk in. So I think
and
that's
I had
encouraging.
applied for other DOJ positions. I'd applied for the honors program, not selected. Applied to U.S. Attorney's office, not selected. And so you just have to be the persistence. Some people don't. If you're a law review at Harvard or whatever, you're going to probably get some opportunities. But others of us, you're going to have to apply and take those opportunities. And DOJ. Not everybody wants to work for DOJ. First, you got to decide you want to work there, and if you do, there are a lot of different types of jobs. And there's an honors program that hires out of law school, out of clerkships. That's a
Yep.
great program, but they don't hire that many people, and DOJ
Mm-hmm.
needs a lot of attorneys. And so you have to look at USA Jobs and look at individual positions, use
Mm-hmm.
contacts,
Mm-hmm.
and and don't just take if you don't get selected the first time or the second time
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to mean that you can't, and get in if that's your goal.
Right.
And they look, like I said, the experience that you build in the jobs that you're in now and the things that you're doing now,
Yep.
even if it's not full-blown trial. If say you're in a law
Mm-hmm.
firm and you're not a partner or anything, you're not going to necessarily get to do a trial.
Yeah.
But if you can do a deposition, or if you can do some pro bono cases
Yeah.
that other people don't want to do, you build up that experience. And then when the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity comes, maybe not the first time, the second time, hopefully
Mm-hmm.
something will come through.
Yeah. And
And so
you were
that's
on the hiring committee while you were at DOJ, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I was at after the tax division. I went to the U.S.
Mm.
Attorney's office, which
Okay.
is kind of full circle where I had been as a
Intern. Yeah.
intern, and I
Mm-hmm.
came back to the civil division, which is a little different than criminal, a lot different than criminal, in that we're
Mm-hmm.
defending federal agencies in civil lawsuits, and then
Yeah.
also bringing affirmative cases, usually fraud cases, on behalf of the
Mm-hmm.
government. So I was an assistant U.S. attorney and then a deputy chief in the civil division
Mm-hmm.
for, I guess, 16 years, 18 years, I guess it was, as a supervisor, and then 4 years as a AUSA. So as a supervisor, I interviewed interns, interviewed AUSAs over the years, different positions. I also did presentations for the honors program too. For the
So
DOJ.
what was the applicant you were looking for? Like, what was the criteria that you were looking at?
They're usually committees. They're usually groups of people making decisions. So everybody has a little different. I'll tell you what I look for,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's not necessarily what everybody looks for. I can tell you
Yeah.
different things other people look for, but for me, I would look for folks who were good at writing. I look at the writing sample. Look at whether they written, not necessarily on a journal or anything, but written briefs. They were comfortable, writing different experiences. And as I said, even though, because it was a litigating office, you have a trial office, even though they maybe not had done a trial, but had you done mock trial, had you done moot court, have you done something in your position that shows that you have an interest in litigating? So I look, I would kind of look at 5 things, basically. I would sort of write out whether you were good at writing briefs, like Court of Appeals type briefs, whether you're good at writing sort of smaller letters and motions quickly, and efficiently. Now, writing emails is important, and things like that, whether you're able to do that, whether you're a good oral advocate in a Court of Appeals type setting, or, arguing a motion, and whether you were, sort of the 4th thing, good at questioning witnesses and doing cross-examination, direct examination, taking depositions. So it was the sort of formal writing, informal writing, formal oral advocacy, and other sort of trial advocacy. And then the 5th was sort of an intangible. You're committed to public service. Are you interested in really being a public servant? Were you able to handle the stress of working in the government, where you don't have necessarily as many resources as you might in other places? So I would kind of look at those 5 things, and nobody was ever necessarily perfect. Some people may have more trial experience and more appellate experience, or they were maybe better at writing longer briefs than sort of the shorter writing, but sort of that combination, because we had a lot of training at DOJ, but a lot of times it wasn't when you first start. You have to kind of hit the ground running. And so you look for people that not maybe had done it before, but would show that potential. And you look at
It
the
can
interview,
be coached. It can be
could be coached up. Exactly. Look at the writing, you look at the references, and then how they come off in the interview. So for attorneys, those are some of the things we're looking for. Similar for interns and students, you're looking, they're not going to necessarily do trial work, but are they committed to public service? Do they
Mm-hmm.
have, an interest in trial advocacy, or if I'm interviewing for criminal, in criminal law, criminal
Mm-hmm.
procedure, have they taken evidence? We're in an office
Mm-hmm.
where issues are going to come up a lot. So have
Yeah.
they taken those types of classes? So I'm
Got
looking
you.
for there.
Got you. So, and it's interesting. I was on Twitter, on law Twitter, and somebody tweeted like, for one, I was going into 2L years, like applying for internships, and they have a writing sample. They were asking like, what do these hiring committees act? Do they really read the entire writing sample? Like, what exactly are they looking for in their writing? Like, so what were you looking for in the writing specifically? Was it punctuation? Was it persuasiveness? Like, what
Well,
specifically?
you don't want, mistakes. You don't want sloppiness. You want it to be
Right.
the best
Mm-hmm.
work. But is it clear? Do I
Mm-hmm.
know what the issue is and what the
Mm-hmm.
resolution is and what the answer is? Is it right, legally correct?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we hit issues where someone would submit something and you might know the issue or litigated the issue and say, well, I don't know, this isn't right.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that it's right, that it's clear.
Mm-hmm.
I like, 5 to 10 pages is
Mm-hmm.
something that you can read sometimes, but you may not have that if you have the bigger brief. You may
Right.
not read the whole thing. You're going to read some of it, a good bit of it,
Mm-hmm.
but that it's not sloppy, that it's right, and that it's clear,
Mm-hmm.
because you're doing a lot of reading and you want it to kind of stand out. And people, there are
Mm-hmm.
different approaches. Sometimes with me, with law students, I might read the writing sample if we have them, before the
Mm-hmm.
interview.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it may come in after you've done the interview, after you've made
Mm-hmm.
sort of rough selections to confirm, okay, I like this person, good resume, good
Mm-hmm.
interview. Let me see the writing sample. Okay, that confirms that they can do the job.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's more of a gating thing. I'm going to read the writing samples and then determine whether or not I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
interview these people in the
Got
first
you.
instance.
Got you.
And there's some people that are, they really will read every line. They're really focused
Mm-hmm.
on the writing sample and almost like and mark it up.
Mm-hmm.
Others, will skim it. I
Mm-hmm.
may be a little not skim, but not necessarily
Put so much
write it
weight
like
on it.
I'm reviewing it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm looking to make sure that it's clear and understand it, and it kind of shows that they can do the job. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have to be strategic. It's harder for first year going into second year,
Mm-hmm.
but if you're out of law school or you're
Yeah.
further in law school, what type of writing sample I'm going to use? I'm going to use
Mm-hmm.
something that fits this job, that's, if it's something if you have it on an evidentiary issue, if I'm applying to a U.S. Attorney's
Mm-hmm.
office
Mm-hmm.
or on a criminal procedure point, I'm going to apply, as opposed to something on securities law, and
Right.
you're applying to a litigation firm. They're going to be like,
Mm-hmm. Doesn't really
you make
fit.
them feel
Yeah.
stupid because I'm like, I don't understand this.
Yeah.
This person is too smart to work for
They
us.
want to enjoy reading it. Yeah.
I enjoy reading
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So you got to be, a little strategic. Like a blog post is maybe going to be too casual. It may be
Mm-hmm.
great, but it may not be something that someone wants to read.
Got you. Yeah.
So,
No, that's good advice. And for all the law students listening, you just got some gems there. Like, put some
well,
work into your writing samples.
think about it.
Yeah.
There are people that really do. People really do read them.
Yes. Yeah. That's the main point. People read them.
Yeah.
They put different weights on it, but they read them.
Yeah.
So going back to your career, you're in the FEC, you're doing a U.S. Attorney's Office, DOJ. What was your goal the entire time? Was the goal always U.S. Attorney's Office, or were you just like, I'm just going to go wherever this is taking me? I'm just going to enjoy the ride.
I think it was probably a little bit more of the latter, go where it
Mm-hmm.
takes me. I mean, I really did want to work in the U.S. Attorney's Office after doing
Mm-hmm.
the internship.
Mm-hmm.
That summer, again, first year, you're really confused.
Mm-hmm.
And then doing that internship, I really thought this kind of makes sense. It was
Mm-hmm.
sort of, an interesting place to work.
Yeah.
I worked with an attorney. She was new to the civil division when I was an intern. Her name was Wilma Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
And she was really, just a great attorney, very good mentor. And it's funny,
Shout out
this
to
was in
Wilma.
86.
Yep.
86. She was a new attorney in the civil division.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I got to the office in 1995, 96, 97, she was the U.S. attorney for D.C. So it was sort of fortunate I was able to work with her. And,
right.
Be
kind to people,
you
you
never know.
Not know. Meet kinds of people.
Yeah,
This is crazy.
so
Yeah.
it was good. And then I became a supervisor when she was the U.S.
Wow.
attorney. So
It's crazy.
it was good. But during that time, I always in the back of my mind thought about working in the U.S. attorney's office
Mm-hmm.
and work with U.S. attorneys when I was in the tax division.
Mm-hmm.
And so then Eric Holder became U.S. attorney for D.C. He was the first African
Mm,
American U.S.
yep.
attorney in D.C.
Yep.
And there was a lot of excitement, at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I guess this was 30 years ago, but there was a lot of excitement. And so then I applied, to the U.S. attorney's office. And like I said, I had applied before and, it didn't work out,
Mm-hmm.
but got an interview. And then even once I got the interview, they were like, well, we don't have any positions right now. You have to wait.
Mm-hmm.
So then I waited several months, and I was fortunate to get to the U.S. attorney's office. And then once
Mm-hmm.
there, you think about doing different things, but there's another case, there's another issue
Mm-hmm.
that you work on, and then you become a supervisor, and then you kind of working on those issues, and so that's was sort of my focus. I don't know if
Yeah.
I had a grand plan,
Mm-hmm.
certainly, and then coming to the FCC was sort of another sort of thing to do that I thought was interesting, a different area
Yeah.
of the law later on in my career, but. There's some people that have very definite goals, and
Mm-hmm.
some people that don't have any, and then some people are more. I'm probably more in the middle
Right. Right.
there,
Right.
but definitely the internships
Mm-hmm.
at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I later became the supervisor of the intern program in
Wow.
the Civil Division, and so
Full circle.
I think try to have those experiences at
Yeah.
least expose you to different things, and you kind of figure
Yeah.
out, kind of what you want to do from there.
Man, that's good. It's hard. I mean, obviously, being fresh out of law school, I'm very like I don't have a grand plan, but it's like you're focusing on what the next move is going to be and what you're trying to
Right.
do next. But I think your approach is the best approach possible. It's just to like be where your feet are and like maximize where you are, and then your friend of the train is going to tell you to apply the tax division, and then the friend is going to become the U.S. Attorney's office, and then it's
Yeah.
like you can't plan that. You can't sit down in 2 year and write out that I'm going to meet my friend of the train and apply the
Yeah,
tax
but the
division.
things that you can do though in
Yeah.
your and I don't know if I necessarily did enough of this when I was in law school,
Mm-hmm.
is as you say, the law school is very front end loaded. It's like you got to
Mm-hmm.
start a sprint, and the
Mm-hmm.
first year grades are really important.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, you should use that whole 3 years, to
Right.
develop skills, look at different
Yep.
things that you're interested in, and kind of build from there. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I did enough. I did, I guess I did moot court, took the trial advocacy class,
Mm-hmm.
but there's certainly a lot of other activities that you can do, internships you can do, positions that
Mm-hmm.
you can take to figure out kind of what you're interested in, what you're good at,
Mm-hmm.
what you want to do. So you really want to use that time as productively,
Right.
as possible. At the same time, you don't want to overload yourself,
Mm-hmm.
but
Right.
you want to try to do different things. So when those
Mm-hmm.
opportunities come, you
You
have the
ready?
skill set
Yep.
to be able to take advantage of it. And again,
Mm-hmm.
persistence, because I've been turned down for a whole lot of jobs over the years and different
Mm-hmm.
things. And so you still want to, continue to try,
Right.
different opportunities.
Man, do you know how many jobs denied you? Can you remember the
No, I
you
can't
count?
remember the number. But I don't keep track. I know
Right.
that I
Right. You
applied
keep
to the
track of the
DOJ
wins.
more
You
than
keep track of
once,
the
keep
W's.
the W's, but I know that I applied different times, different.
Yeah.
I applied to teach at UDC 5 or 6
Wow.
years ago. I applied to adjunct at other schools. They didn't have
Mm,
positions, other things come up, and I had
wow.
got that opportunity
Mm-hmm.
later. So again, you have
Yeah.
to be you have to be
Persistent.
persistent,
Yeah.
open to trying different things,
Yeah.
and it's tough. It's
Mm-hmm.
uh, you know,
Yeah.
don't want
So
to try to
so
be realistic.
yeah. So why prosecution? As a black man being a prosecutor, I've heard all the stereotypes and people try to talk me out of it, the doubt, the how can you be part of the system and all this stuff. In the 90s and 80s, like you decided to become a prosecutor in this time. Why?
Well, I guess a couple things. One, you don't want to cut, you need jobs, right? And so you want to say, I'm going to
To
cut
make some
out,
money.
you need, to may not a lot of money, but you need jobs. So just to say,
Right.
I'm not going to do this whole area
This
of
whole
law as a trial advocate,
you
you
minimizing the
minimize your
pool. Like,
opportunity, the pool
yeah,
of things you're going to
God.
do.
The
But
percentage now is lower.
yeah, the percentages are lower. And so you look at that as an opportunity. But I
Mhm.
do understand and I respect people that say, that they can't, work in a particular system.
Yeah.
And they talk about things like the crime bill
Yep.
and the incarceration rate
Mhm.
and things like that, and the unfairness of the system. I totally get that. And if you have the opportunity and it matches your philosophy, God bless you. But on the other
Mhm.
hand, the system needs people like us. It needs
Mhm.
people in the prosecution office because prosecutors have so much discretion
Yeah.
in deciding whether or not they're going to charge someone or not,
Mhm.
what type of sentences they're going to recommend, how
Mhm.
they're going to present the evidence,
Mhm.
how they're just going to look at these situations. So you need that balance. And
Mhm.
that's what, one of the things that Eric Holder, when he became the prosecutor for the
Mhm.
Attorney General, and then before that, the U.S. Attorney, is that he really changed the focus of the U.S. Attorney's office.
Mhm.
He put prosecutors in the D.C. community. There
Mhm.
was sort of this very much in the 80s and 90s and before, the U.S. Attorney's office over here and the rest of the D.C. community over there, and
Mhm.
maybe still some of that. But he made an effort, and then Wilma Lewis became U.S. Attorney for Holland to pick up on that, and really physically putting prosecutors in the community,
Yeah.
making us interact more with the community, having things like implicit bias training when we
Mhm.
became Department of Justice to kind of deal with some of these issues.
Yeah.
And so, but it's important to have people of color, people of different backgrounds, and
Mhm.
Black people in the
Mhm.
U.S. Attorney's office, in the Department of Justice, making those decisions. Now,
Yeah.
I'll caution you though that
Mhm.
I know you're going to get your prosecutor position, soon. Uh, you're not going to be able to change the world when you
Mm.
come into the office.
Mhm.
You're not going to be able to set everyone free and do the things that you may want to do.
Mhm.
You can make incremental change.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. And you do make a difference in those positions. But it is tough. I mean, there are times when you
Yeah.
feel like, I don't necessarily agree with this. I don't, but this is the position. This is what the law says. This
Right.
is the office policy. And you have to kind of make, like I said, incremental change. I can give you an example.
Mhm.
Um, One of the duties I had in the U.S. Attorney's office was collecting debt from uh, criminal defendants, people after they were
Mhm.
prosecuted, there was something called the Mandatory Victim Restitution Act. So in
Yeah.
every
Like
case,
the victim crime fund type thing. It's the
right, the
state.
judge
Yeah.
has to order
Mhm.
restitution, and the
Yeah.
financial litigation unit in the U.S. Attorney's offices would collect that
Mhm.
restitution. And one of my areas of supervision, working with we call it the FLU, Financial Litigation Unit,
Mhm.
and we would is a great group of paralegals and techs that I work with, and
Mhm.
staff that are very diligent in collecting the funds. One of the
Mhm.
things we would do is garnish the salary, and once the person gets out,
Mm.
finally gets a job,
Yeah.
and then they get garnished.
Tough.
Now, what
It's tough.
happens when the garnishment notice hits their employer from the
Mm.
U.S. Attorney's office collecting on a
Right.
crime?
They lose their
Well,
job.
yeah, and so you don't collect. So one of
Right.
the things we tried to do was do voluntary wage allotments. So we would say,
Mhm.
rather than us doing a garnishment,
Mhm.
you sign this agreement, and there was some and it was not necessarily fair, but it was better than the garnishment that you would say pay something, so we don't have
Right.
to garnish, and
You
therefore
lose
you
your
can
job.
continue to have your job.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, little things like that. But I
Mhm.
had I had a judge that say, this isn't really fair.
Mm.
That people finish their sentence and they still have these huge judgments that
Mm.
follow them for 20 years, and it makes
Yeah.
it difficult to get a fresh start.
Mhm.
And the judge was right, but I said, that's the law. We have to,
Mm.
apply the law, and we're sort of reviewed on how well we're doing with these collection efforts.
Mm.
But you could do a little bit of a change with these agreements as opposed to the
Mhm.
full restitution.
Yeah.
There are other little and over time, bigger things that happen when people are in,
Hmm.
these positions. I think certain arguments in criminal cases people don't make, or you may confront folks that they're doing things
Hmm.
that aren't appropriate when you're in
Yeah.
the office, but you can't change immediately.
Right.
But over time, I think you can do more.
Yeah.
And I think, look at Eric Holder's time as U.S. attorney. He hired a lot more black attorneys than had been in the
Hmm.
office before, and that continued to change. And that changed sort of the whole focus. So
Yeah.
again, I understand people that say fundamentally I can't work as a prosecutor, but if you want to
Mhm.
be, want to litigate, and you're interested in criminal or even civil litigation, you can't
Yeah.
cut yourself out from that whole
The whole side.
area,
Yeah.
particularly employment.
Yeah.
But there you can make some change.
Right. To concede one of the strongest tools in our legal system to
Right.
one race is insane.
Right.
Like that, just that off of that alone just doesn't make any sense. Unless you plan
Yeah.
on just not being a part of, like, you want to be like anti-tax people or anti-citizen type people. But like, unless you feel out being that, like, as long as you live in our system, to say none of us should be represented in a predominantly white space with the most amount of power in our system,
Yeah.
it
It's
doesn't
a
make any sense.
recipe. You'll see sentences that aren't fair. You
Hmm.
see, like I said, I think sometimes folks will say things and do things in their theories and their court
Oh yeah,
presentations that aren't appropriate.
yeah.
And
And
people
judges
need to
take those
speak out.
recommendations.
Judges will
Judges
hear
go
that.
with what you
Yeah,
say.
judges,
Yeah.
what you say, or
Hmm.
judges, it's just who they pick on the jury, who's
Right.
going
All of it
to
matters.
have
Yeah.
participate on the jury. All
Hmm.
those things matter, and I just think,
Yep.
shutting yourself, like you say, shutting yourself out from that space when
Hmm.
we need jobs. One, people need to be
Yeah.
in these positions, and I think you do make change. Now, again, not overnight, not
Right.
immediately, but there are opportunities to
Absolutely.
you really make a difference.
Yeah.
And
The
then there are
impact in
stepping
that
stones to
community.
people
Yeah.
to get to the bench. A lot of former
Hmm.
prosecutors become judges, and so
Hmm.
having that experience, gets you to that where you can have even a greater impact
Yeah. No, I agree.
um,
100%.
down the
Yeah.
line.
Yeah. So you've been practicing, and then you decide to become a law professor. I always say, not every lawyer makes a great law professor. I feel like teaching is a whole other
Yeah,
skill. How did you transition into teaching? How did you transition into that
and
skill
that's
of teaching law?
another sort of contact from law school.
Mm,
Uh, Classmate Jay Cook, who's a professor now at the University of Georgia.
nice.
He was also a former assistant U.S. attorney, and
Mm-hmm.
like I said, a good friend in law school.
Mm-hmm.
And he left many years ago. He left the U.S. Attorney's office to teach, and he would, talk about the experiences. And he taught at several different schools, and he
Mm-hmm.
actually taught with Professor Britton,
Oh,
Dean
nice.
Britton
Wow.
at
Yeah.
UBC.
Shout out to Dean
They're good
Britton.
friends. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and so he would say, you should consider being an adjunct. You should consider. And so like
Mm,
I said, I had looked into it at a few other schools, and didn't work out. But I'd worked with the interns in the U.S. Attorney's office, and I had taught
mm-hmm.
at the training center, Department of Justice. I taught law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Different, obvious, big difference from that and teaching at law school. But
Yeah.
it was something interested me. My wife is a professor at the University of Maryland Dental School, and
Nice.
she's been at it for a long time.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was something interesting. Our kids were in college with this empty nest, so I
Mm-hmm.
thought it must be something, a challenge. And
Yeah.
Professor Cook, Jay Cook, sent me the advertisement for UDC when sadly
Mm-hmm.
Professor Reuben Cook had
Yeah.
passed
Rest in
away.
peace. Rest in peace.
And
Mm-hmm.
so Dean Adams was
Yeah.
able to give me the opportunity to teach property.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, it is a new skill. I lean into a lot. I have a good friend who's a professor, undergrad in Indiana,
Mm-hmm.
and he's been,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, a professor a long time. He's been helpful. My wife,
Awesome.
Professor Cook, the UDC
Yeah.
Professor
And your
Lee,
parents, it's in
Dean
your blood.
Johnson.
Your parents are teachers too.
Well, yeah, that's what my mom says.
Right.
But it's trial and error with that too. I learned a lot. I learned a lot from the students, and it's continue to try to get better. And so we taught property, and then
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about mock trial in these competitions until Dean Adams called and said we have this mock trial class,
Right.
and be interested in teaching that. And so started looking into that and learned
Right.
about this whole mock trial community. It's been interesting.
And that's how we've been.
Yeah.
Well, we did meet in property when Professor Ruben could pass away.
Yeah.
And you taught, like, I think our second semester of property.
Too, right?
Yeah. And it was great.
Yeah.
And then we obviously got closer because you were a mock trial coach, and
Right.
you taught mock trial.
Mock trial. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what was your experience like first semester teaching mock trial?
First semester teaching mock trial, like I said, I didn't know anything. I knew I taught trial advocacy, and that was always what I thought I would teach, as opposed to property was trial advocacy. From working in the U.S. Attorney's Office and doing trials in the tax division. So mock trial, I decided, I was going to teach trial advocacy, and then figure out the competitions as we went along. And we talked about Stetson being kind of the one of the big mock trial programs, and so I reached out to them before the semester and got some advice from Professor Bowles, who teaches there. People at Temple were very helpful, and you had 10 of you guys in the class, and it was a really good group. I mean, not just saying that, all the folks I've taught, it was you guys were a good group to start out with, and it was an interesting time. We're all COVID, so it was online, and it was during the Chauvin trial after Rodney King. So it was a really good, interesting time to be teaching trial advocacy. And then so that fall we just kind of focused on the fundamentals of trial advocacy and kind of getting to know each other and working together. And then the spring, we get into the competitions, and we did Balsa, and we did Phi Alpha Delta has a competition, and Trial and Tribulations. It's a competition from the University of South Carolina. So learning just kind of the how the competitions work. And I say, and I said in the first class with you guys, that my goal isn't that we necessarily, we do what we do in the competitions will happen. The goal is that you could be better trial advocates, that we learn trial advocacy overall, and use the competitions to build our skills.
Absolutely.
But as you get into it, you want to win. You want to be successful. And you start getting into the competitions and compete. And we've had some success, and we continue to kind of build on that. And the alums, I know you had Kendall Rodriguez
and Jovina. They're also alumni of the Conversate podcast. Shout out to them.
And they've helped. They've been great coaches. And I know James King, who you had. He was James. Sort of started the program and everything, and so work with him a little bit. So it's been good to work with the alum, see the students develop, and continue to compete. And we've done some different competitions. We did the regional competitions for the national trial competition, and then we did the AHA competition last year. So hopefully we'll get back into those and keep building.
I definitely admire that about you. You never stopped learning. I feel like, and it's inspiring because with the amount of success and experience that you've had, you still came to a level of, I'm going to start at zero and build up and learn this new thing. I saw you talk to a lot of people and pick people's brains and took the time to learn this new area. And it's inspiring because I know that when I get farther in my career, never to feel like, I've been at the DOJ, I've been at the FEC, I know about mock trial, I could know this. No, like it's a whole new arena. Like you may know in this area, but it's a new arena, and I'm gonna have to start at zero and learn a new thing. So I definitely admired that about you when you did those things.
Well, thank you. It kind of makes it interesting, right? If you just sort of stay static and do some of the same things. So it's good to learn new things. Kind of keeps your mind active, and getting to meet new people. So it's been a good experience. So
what would you say is the biggest difference? What would you say is the biggest difference between mock trial and actual trial? Like, what are some things you just can't do if you bring it to real world?
one of the there are a couple things. One is a lot of the mock trial problems are tried to be written even, like facts
Mm-hmm.
on both sides.
Right.
Usually not
Like perfect.
necessarily true in a real trial. There's that perfect
Yeah.
symmetry. Although if there's too much evidence one way or the other, the case would settle. So that's
Right.
some of the
Mm-hmm.
reality. The other is usually often dealing with a jury, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's a little bit different than trying to score points with the judges. You're trying
Mm-hmm.
to connect with the jury in terms of
Mm-hmm.
your evidence. You're not in a trial. Style is important,
Mm-hmm.
but it's getting in the evidence. And so
Yes.
sometimes I think in mock trial, if something doesn't go right, but you are persistent and you ultimately get it in, you don't
Mm-hmm.
get points for that because it may not necessarily be smooth. But
Right.
in a trial, the key thing is to get the evidence in,
Mm-hmm.
and not necessarily the style points. And
Right.
some of the competitions, the students that do well are a little phony, I guess is a little bit
Yes.
lacking in
Yes.
that authenticity.
No
And
seasoning.
no, right?
Just
They're like
bland.
they do debates. They're good at
Right.
debating, and they're good at
Right.
sort of scoring the points.
Yeah.
And they don't have that sort of authenticity. I think in real trial, that you show that you're a real person, and that
Right.
that authenticity is important, not just with a jury, but also with, even with a bench trial. While it can be a
Mm-hmm.
little artificial in the mock trial, but a lot of it is very similar. Cross-examination is hard in real trial and in
Mm-hmm.
mock
Mm-hmm.
trial. A lot of lawyers will say, oh, that theme and theory stuff is just for, mock trial. You just get to the
Mm-hmm.
evidence. But I think having that theme, it doesn't necessarily be the first thing out of your mouth, but having like
Right.
some way of presenting your evidence is important, in a jury
Mm-hmm.
trial, in a real trial.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of take that from mock trial,
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
aspect of it.
Yeah. I think that was the biggest thing I learned too. And I said this too, like when we were going over reviewing for some of our competitions, it just felt like we were putting too much, like not showmanship, but too much attitude. Not attitude. I'm gonna say attitude, but too much extra stuff on it, or we were being too expressive. That's the best
Right.
word I felt. Where like
Yeah.
where our competitor was very just like straight with the law and nothing. But we were doing a law too, but I felt like we were being too expressive. And like you said, they didn't really appreciate that. But what I did learn was that sometimes it was too much expressive, but not enough detailed in like, okay, these are the objections. These are how you respond to the objections. This is
Right.
the law. This is where you put this. So there has to be a balance where you can be expressive. You could be who you are, but you also need to know the facts of your case.
Right.
You also need to know the rules of evidence. Like it needs
Right.
to be by the book. Yeah.
Well, I think the thing that I've learned, and one, I think we've been really good with the theme theory in their opening
Yes.
and closing.
Our openings are always
And the
fire. I feel like our
presentation.
openings and closing are amazing. I
Yeah,
always
yeah,
feel like
always
they're
really,
fire.
really good, and better.
Yeah.
And the judges will comment on how not just saying a theme in theory, but tying it to the evidence.
Exactly.
Like in the trial you did, the theory was that we were the prosecutor, and this person, was this two personalities. It was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But
That was
we
fire.
presented
Yep.
evidence as to when he attacked people,
Yeah.
and in the past, and how when confronted, this other side of his personality would come
Yep.
out. So we
Yep.
tied the evidence to it. A lot of times folks will make a comment or have a theory, but it's not connected anyway to the evidence. And so I thought we were good. And then I think for the most part, been very authentic in
Oh yeah.
presentation. And
Absolutely.
every year I go back and I try to look at the scores, and I try to see what we did well and what we need to work on. And then the next year is sort of
Build on it.
build on it. Like the first year, I thought we lost a lot of points on cross-examination. It may have been because it was virtual and it was sort of hard to interrupt and control the witness. But and the judges would say we didn't control the witnesses enough. So the next year, I tried to kind of build on that,
Yeah.
to be better in cross. And then the next year was evidence. I thought we could have been better, as you were saying, in the rules of
Yep.
evidence.
Yep.
And so I really said, bring your evidence rules to every mock trial class, and to really kind of focus on building on understanding of the rules of evidence. I know you guys have great evidence teachers at UDC, and
Yep.
so I would say bring your notes from class, bring your questions from class, and kind of build and see how that's applied. I told Dean Johnson that mock trial is like evidence applied. It's seeing how it really kind of plays out. And so, and again, in the competition that you and Diamond did, we were really good at,
Shout out to
being
Diamond.
able to get in.
She's passed the bar. Shout out to you.
Diamond Ross, yeah, congratulations. Yeah, passed the bar out in California too, which is not easy.
Yep.
And you guys were good at getting those that past event in, not as character evidence, but as motive, the past time that the defendant had attacked someone. And, so we got some good rulings on that and had good alternative ways of getting that in.
Yeah.
So we want to, we tried to build on that. So this year, sort of as a preview, my goal is to work on our direct examinations. I think that's like, easy points. And sometimes in our prep, we focus on our open and close, and we focus on what we're going to cross.
Yeah.
But we sort of say, we'll just send you, I'll email you the questions for direct, and you read them, and we don't really do the walkthrough or
exactly, and build that chemistry with your witness. Yeah.
With your witness. So this year I want to kind of work on building that chemistry and do some exercises where we sort of interview each other and sort of play some games where we build on having that chemistry with the witnesses, not just witnesses that we work with in class, classmates, but even bringing in guests where you can kind of practice on people you don't know and how would you prep them as your witness, and kind of get to know them. Because the national trial competition and Costello, they provide the witnesses, so you have to you get like 15 minutes to witch at them, and then you present them, and that's that's 30-40 points right there. That if we are good at getting our exhibits and evidence, get smooth. I know Kendall and Jovina are really good at teaching that.
Yep.
So we can don't get hung up on when to identify an exhibit or when to offer it and all that stuff. It's really smooth.
Yeah.
Again, still emphasizing evidence, cross-examination, theme and theory, and just keep building.
Absolutely.
So that's
and these are amazing things that actually stick with you throughout your career, because I'm using them now when I have trial coming up and stuff like that. And not to be mock trial versus law review, but mock trial is way more useful than law review, unless you go make a career out of legal argument. And some people do, but I feel like mock trial, you get to learn actual practical skills, how to introduce something into evidence, how to impeach a witness. Like you're going to be doing this. If you're going to be a litigator, you're going to be doing this in your career. And how you learn how to do it in mock trial, you can copy and paste and do it in your career, and it'll be just as effective and probably better than some attorneys who are practicing because they don't know how to do those things because they didn't take mock trial.
They take mock trial. I think it's great. The trial advocacy classes, mock trial classes.
Yep.
If you're going to be a litigator, and law review is great too. I'm not going to say
shout out to law review.
That shows that you're really in the top.
I feel like law review gets more love than mock trial. So I'm trying to big up mock trial.
Let's give mock trial more love. I'm all for that.
Give mock trial
but I'm not going to say if you get on law review, get on law review. But
do it.
But also if you can do both, that's great.
Right.
Too,
true. True.
But definitely if you're interested in litigation, it helps when you get an interview to talk about the real trial, the mock trials that you did and the evidence, and when you actually, get the job. So I look forward to hearing more about your trials, and I know we had some people now public defenders that were in mock trial in different places around the country. So that's good.
No, I'm excited, and I haven't had a
you're
trial
coming back
yet.
to coach.
Absolutely.
Right.
Full circle moment. Right. It's so weird because I wanted to become a lawyer because I did a mock trial. Once I did a mock trial, people were putting the idea in my head. But once I did a program and I did a mock trial, and again, there was some confirmation. I did a direct examination and I received the award for best examination of the whole trial. I was in the 8th grade, and once that happened, I was like, what? I'm good at something? Like, oh yeah, I'm going for this. So I went to law school because I wanted to do mock trial. Like that was I really enjoyed doing mock trial. So
good.
Being able to now have a full circle moment and come back and be a coach, that's amazing to me. That's amazing because I know law students invested in me in the 8th grade because they were the ones who put that on. So to be able to like come back around as a new attorney fresh out of law school and impart wisdom on law students now, it's amazing. And that's my duty. That's my duty to reciprocate that. So absolutely.
Cool.
I had
you
a
helped
great
us
experience
last winter, so help us again.
So I had a great experience, and thank you for taking the time to invest in us as students, and to build that skill because it's going to carry us in our careers. Yeah. So I think it's a great way to segue into our final segment of the show, which is I call the closing argument. This is perfect because it's my mock trial coach. So you know how to do these. So what I do is it's the closing argument. You're leaving the audience with some final words of wisdom, of encouragement, something for them to go with. But the caveat is you have to use the word of the day in your closing argument. You think of it as a theme, or not as a theme. I don't want you to use this as the theme, but think of it as a little tool in your closing argument. And the word of the day is invidious. Invidious. And I cannot tell you the definition. You just have to use it to the best of your ability. That's where the creative side comes in. Just throw it in there. But yeah, leave the audience with some final words of wisdom.
With some final words of invidious.
The closing argument.
The closing argument. Well, the closing argument is a summation. And the summation is things that you have talked about in your presentation. It shouldn't be anything new. It should be things that are in evidence, and things that I've talked about have been persistence in terms of anything that you want to do is, work to be, persistent. Don't take the first no as, you can't do something. Use the connections, both people that you've worked with and people that you've supervised lean into those connections, not only getting their help, but help other people, look people, give advice, pass on when you see positions, work with people. So persistence, working with your people, that you've worked with before and been in school with, have that support system. Look for those moments to spark, those moments to spark your career and your interest. Hold on to those, and then sort of minimize the negative and build on those positive things. If you're looking to work at DOJ or anywhere, kind of look at what you're doing now to build upon those things. So just that persistence, creativity. We talked about threes, right? We talked about things. So
the theme of threes.
Think about threes. Think about that persistence. Think about that peer group, and that hang on to the positive over the negative. And Inventius, there's a movie I think named that was based on South Africa, and we talked about divestment in South Africa and Nelson Mandela. So that's important. That protest can be successful, as it did in South Africa and in the area.
Amazing. Hey, give it up.
That's what I got. That's what I got. And I'm going to look up the word. I don't even know what the word is. So continue to learn. His other point is look up the word.
Right. Invidious is of having an unpleasant nature, having a tendency to harm or cause resentment.
Oh, so you want to avoid that.
Right. You want to avoid that. So you do not want to be invidious. But you
don't want to be invidious.
There was some
movie was not invidious, was Invictus. It was a different name of that movie.
Something like that. Right. But there was some invidious natures in the apartheid. It was the people
apartheid, and in interaction with that professor in law school.
Right.
That I talked about.
Invidious. Yeah.
But you want to lessen the negative.
And
maximize
much as
the
positive.
Maximize the positive experience to kind of build on it. Because and sometimes you have to do it yourself. It may not have that outside. You got to sort of have that internal fortitude build on it.
Because if you allow those things to impact your mind, you would have been discouraged. You would have kept going, and you would have been able to accomplish all the things you accomplished.
Some of the things, and try to pass that on. That idea on, and
absolutely.
Keep at it.
Absolutely.
And, appreciate the opportunity to talk and learn a new word.
And thank you for of course, and thank you for being on it, because I definitely learned a lot from your story. I know the listeners are going to also. So thank you for taking the time and continue to do the work and imparting in students' lives and passing that information down. And now
thank you.
You've cemented it on a podcast now. It's forever in audio.
Oh wow, here we go.
You're still doing the work.
It's my first podcast, so good experience. Whoa, you say new experiences.
I'm so happy that people's first podcast is Conversate. It makes me feel good.
Yeah, here Conversate.